Well, hello, everyone. My name is Libby Mucciaroni. I am the Associate Director of Education, Technology, and Member Engagement at the Organic Trade Association. I'm so pleased to welcome everyone here today for our webinar, A Spice, Herb, and Tea Bazaar, the Benefits of Organic. A few housekeeping items that I'd like to share with everyone here as we get started before the real show gets going here in the next minute. First of all, I'd like to let you know, as you've seen, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared out. So tomorrow, all of our registrants will receive a follow-up email from the Organic Center. It will include a link to view the spice report that we're talking about a bit today, as well as an on-demand link to view the recording. During registration, we asked all of you to let our presenters know any questions that you might have. Thank you so much for those really fantastic questions. The panel discussion today, I think, is going to be really fantastic, and you're in for a treat. And finally, if you happen to have any questions as our panelists are speaking throughout the next hour, please do use the Q&A box on the platform and let us know what you're wondering and what you'd like to hear from them more. Our presenters will be engaging in a really robust, dynamic conversation, and I'm really thrilled to hear what they have to say and for you to learn more today with us. And finally, if any of you happen to have any technical issues during the presentation, you can message me through the platform in the Q&A box, and I can assist you as best as possible. And with that, I would like to first briefly announce our three panelists. As you can see on the screen, we have a really dynamic set of panelists today. Tony Bedard from Frontier Co-op, Greg Lightfoot from Caluston, and Raj Vable from Young Mountain Tea. And they are joined by our discussion leader, Dr. Amber Sciligo from the Organic Center. But to start today's webinar, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome on Tom Chapman, the Organic Trade Association CEO and the Organic Center's Executive Director, who's going to start the conversation today. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Libby, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I have my cup of tea here. I cleared my throat. I apologize for that. So the Organic Center is the trusted source of science for organic farming and organic products. We convene credible, evidence-based science to fill knowledge gaps and support organic farmers and businesses. We work collectively with stakeholders across the industry to advance organic by facilitating research, developing resources to promote the benefits of organic, and communicating those benefits to consumers. This work is vital to grow the organic market. Without knowledge and cutting-edge research, farmers and businesses wouldn't have the tools they need to develop and adapt their operations. Similarly, without data and research, we wouldn't be able to make credible claims about organic benefits to consumers. So if you haven't already, please go to theorganiccenter.com after this session and see some of our latest work, from connecting organic practices to climate mitigation to highlighting the unique benefits of specific organic products, which brings us to why we are here today. I am so excited to be sharing this virtual Zoom stage with these other participants, in part because my past involves work in the organic tea and spice industry, and in part because I'm humbled to share this stage with such great leaders in the tea and spice industry. These leaders and businesses don't only exemplify the benefits of organic in their operations and supply chains, but they also show how business can use organic not as a destination, but as a foundation to build on even greater impact. In the US, the organic herb and spice category has grown tremendously, 220% in the past decade. Organic teas have increased by more than 500% since 2012. It's amazing growth in sales in these categories. In my past, I worked in these supply chains, traveling to origin to connect, verify, support, and negotiate with in-country organic tea and spice partners. It was a pretty cool job, I have to admit. I've always been struck, though, about how visible tea and herbs and spices are to consumers in our everyday lives. You know, tea leaves transform hot water into a vital morning ritual. Herbs and medicinals help us when we're sick. And, spices are critical ingredients in any recipe that transform food from mundane to delicious. But despite their importance in our everyday lives, we as consumers are very separated from their production. While some, like garlic, onions, and capsicums and other herbs, are grown here domestically, the vast majority of teas, herbs, and spices are grown abroad, often by smallholders, and grower groups that transit these spices through long, convoluted supply chains that are as complicated as their history. As each spice, tea, and herb is as different as they are similar as well. Roots, barks, leaves, flowers, seeds, and fruits from all around the world are grown, collected, and processed in different ways. It's this separation and diversity that makes organic all the more important when buying these products, in part for the traceability and oversight that organic brings by requiring US accredited and vetted equivalent certifiers to inspect and verify the entire supply chain from farmer and brand, but also for ensuring that the value add that organic brings is embedded at the farmer level to bring these farmers, often in the developing world, the community and natural resource benefits that come from organic production. I hope this sets the stage for the rest of our program, but I won't hold us up any longer. So let me welcome Amber Sciligo, PhD and Director of Science Programs for the Organic Center. Amber?
Sorry, I lost my mouse there for a second. Thanks so much, Tom, for that introduction. Today, I'm going to share with you one of these communication products that we produce at the Organic Center. We produce these topical reports. We try to produce them annually. And we do have different kinds of reports at the center. Some of those include more technical reports that offer guidance to help farmers address production challenges. We also put out reports that help put our scientific publications into a larger organic context. And then we have these kinds of reports that really aim to put the benefits behind a certain kind of product. Some of our past reports have included discussing the benefits of organic dairy, of organic meat, and organic cotton. And this year we focused on the benefits of organic spices, herbs, and teas, which is something that a lot of consumers don't know a lot about, probably because so many of these products are grown outside the United States. But despite that, we still consume them every day and probably in every meal that we eat, just like what Tom was mentioning. So I wanted to explain why we did spices, teas, and herbs, which is kind of a mouthful, and you're going to hear these 3 words in a row a lot throughout this webinar. But we put them together because when we started thinking about one, it was really hard to think about it without the others. And that's because I think because all 3 are used for medicinal purposes and all 3 are used for culinary purposes. And also herbs and spices can be on the same plant, but they're just using different parts of that plant. So it was really hard to tease these 3 apart. So we put them all together, which did also help from a scientific perspective because it gave us a larger base of information to sort through. But in that journey of trying to find the benefits, we found that organic spices, herbs, and teas are not only good for the body, but they are also good for the supply chain, the entire process, including the people who are involved. And so this new report that we have highlights all of these benefits of organic as backed by science. And I'm not sure if I'm advancing these. I'm going to go ahead and do it. Hopefully we don't double dip there. So I wanted to give just a high level overview of what you can find in this report. This report presents science that highlights the benefits of growing and processing spices, herbs, and teas to the US organic standard. This can be used as a guide for consumers who want their choices to have a positive impact, not just on their own bodies, on their families, but also on the environment at large and on the farmers who produce their food. So to develop this report, like all of our other topical reports, we scour the literature, the peer-reviewed scientific literature. We also interviewed different companies, or we usually interview different companies for all the other reports too. And for this report specifically, we included information from 45 different peer-reviewed articles, and we interviewed 15 different spice, herb, and tea companies. So in addition to the at-a-glance key takeaways that you'll find in the report, we have it broken down into these sections that I have here on the screen for you. So the first section is a description of organic standards, really helping consumers understand the difference that organic makes when it comes to spices and teas, particularly from the standards perspective. Then we touch on the pesticide use in conventional spices, herbs, and teas, highlighting the quality benefits of organic. And this includes health benefits of organic for consumers as well as for worker health and safety. And then we have a couple sections on socioeconomic and environmental benefits of organic spices, herbs, and teas, focusing primarily on soil health, heavy metals, biodiversity, and climate change. And then we end the report with a big showcase of programs that various spice, herb, and tea brands are implementing that help support community development and environmental stewardship. And today, our panelists are going to share some of those programs with you. And I'll share just some teasers of the key findings in the report that shows how the production of organic spices, teas, and herbs reduces potential for consumption of harmful pesticide residues. And this is important when we're talking about dried products, because in the drying process, these residues can be concentrated. Organic production limits the uptake of heavy metals to the environment, but also to the consumed product in some cases. It reduces occupational exposure to hazardous pesticides. And that exposure has been linked to negative health outcomes in farm workers. Organic production helps mitigate climate change by boosting soil health and avoiding synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. And we know that it requires a lot of energy and releases greenhouse gases in the process of making those fertilizers. And organic production improves farmer livelihoods, beyond reducing the occupational exposure to pesticides, but by also increasing household incomes with organic price premiums. And I'll give you just a few other compelling findings, which are maybe in slightly more detail, things that I found interesting in the process of doing this research. One is that the water-soluble pesticides that are used in growing of tea leaves can infuse during the brewing process and transfer into consumers' cups. And this makes overboiling of teas that are non-organic and non-recommended practice. I think of all of the highlights, this stuck out to me because I am a person who, when I use a tea bag, I will let it sit forever and ever, and I'll keep adding boiling water to it. So it makes me very much appreciate having my organic tea in that cup. Another compelling result was that organic tea premiums from organic certification can increase farmer revenue between 10 to 15%. Some studies that we found suggested that stacking certifications like organic and fair trade can offer additional monetary benefits, and we will dive into this a little bit more deeply to discuss some of these nuances later in the panel. And then finally, organic fertilizers can help remediate soil by reducing the mobility of heavy metals and therefore reducing the uptake of those heavy metals into the plants and therefore into the final product. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, on the other hand, do the opposite. So they can acidify the soils, they can free up those heavy metal ions. That increases the uptake into plants, which then can be ultimately consumed. Keep losing my mouse there, sorry. Okay, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and thank all of the brands who shared so much with us to help shape this report. They shared their expertise. They shared sometimes their scientific resources, which was very helpful for us, their insight, and also some stories from the field. You'll find some of the programs, those exciting programs that I mentioned, at the back of our report for some of these brands. For other brands that are listed here, you can find some recipes from them at our microsite that's dedicated to this work. And I think Libby's going to put the link to that website in our chat box. Okay, so While I'm excited to share with you our report, the high level summary of our report, that's only one objective of today's webinar. The main objective, actually, which I'm really excited about, is to host this amazing lineup of panels that we have here today. And they're going to take us much deeper than the science can in that report to share their brand experiences from the perspective of their supply chain. So today we are joined by Tony Bedard, CEO of Frontier Co-op, Greg Lightfoot, Vice President of Global Business Development of Calustian Corporation, and Raj Vable, founder of Young Mountain Tea. So if you all will turn your cameras on, there you are. So nice to see your faces. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to start this panel discussion with a little bit of an icebreaker question. So my question for you is, what is your favorite spice, herb, or tea, and why? And I'm going to go in the order that I see your faces on my screen. So we'll go Tony, Greg, and Raj.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity today. My favorite, I'd go right to our Madagascar vanilla. It's not only because it's one of our top sellers, but the process of bringing vanilla and vanilla beans to the market is much art as science. So for those of you who've never had the pleasure of going to source vanilla, is actually an orchid. Each bean's hand pollinated, hand harvested. The curing takes months, the sweating, the drying, the conditioning. And in the end, you got this exotic plant that brings, through a lot of hard work, brings this aromatic, rich flavor to you, the consumer. So Madagascar vanilla is just my favorites.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Yes, mine is sage, and not just because Thanksgiving is next week. It is one of those most unique herbs that I've ever dealt with because of the fact, kind of what Amber said in the report, we flavor our foods with it. We also have antioxidant properties in some of the chemicals in the oils. And it also makes a very soothing tea that's used outside of the United States in many places. So it doesn't hurt that some of the best people in the world, I think, are the Albanians, which are probably best at this, kind of like Tony's talking about the Madagascar. We have certain attachments to people because of those locations, but sage would be mine.
And hey, everybody, this is Raj. Start by saying it's really a pleasure to be with you and an honor to be sharing this space with Greg, Tony, and Amber. Well, I am a tea person, so that's where my mind went first. But within the tea world, my favorite and what I'm drinking right now is a white tea from northern India called Kumaon White. Kumaon is the name of the region. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, white tea is my favorite style because it's the least processed of any tea type. It's made typically in the spring, right after the tea plants come out of their winter dormancy. The first shoots of the year get harvested and then very lightly dried to make this tea. And because of that light processing, the vibrancy of spring really feels captured, and the health and vigor of the tea plant is really what we're enjoying. So I love it both for the delicate, nuanced flavors of the tea, but then also sort of the mental connection that I make to springtime and what white tea represents.
Thanks. Those are such great answers and made me think about each of those things in different ways I hadn't thought about before. And I wasn't planning on going, but I was requested to go last minute. So I'm not going to have such a deep answer, but I would say that probably the most used spice in my kitchen is smoked paprika. And that's partly because I eat a plant-based diet for the most part. And the smoked paprika has really helped add this layer of flavor that I cannot get without having meat in my dishes. And so I love smoked paprika. And I'm going to sneak in one more, which is cilantro or coriander, depending on where you're coming from. I use it in like every kind of cuisine, but also it's the only thing I can grow in my garden over winter in Kentucky. And it thrives. I can't grow it in the summer, but the winter it loves. Go figure. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit of that personal insight. We're going to move into a little bit more of a business side of things here. And Asked each of you to come prepared to share more about yourselves, your companies, what you care about your organizations, and any exciting programs that you're working on right now. We are going to go in the order of Tony, Raj, and then Greg. So.
Okay. Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I'm Tony Bazaar. I'm the CEO of Frontier Co-op. Frontier's been around since 1976. We're a member-owned cooperative with more than 47,000 members. And some people might recognize us as we do business under the Simply Organic, Frontier Co-op, Orication, Plant Boss brands. I've only been at this company for a little over 31 years. We've been at it, a lot longer. And since very early on, we source from over, many countries around the world. We're up, around 50 countries. And we go to source with the kind of a unique, what we call our well-air sourcing program, where we work to create sustainable partnerships through business building and community building activities as we go out and source herbs, spices, teas, oils, and extracts. If you think about business building, it's things like harvesting and processing equipment, it's analytical equipment. If you think about community building, we're talking about schools, water project, medical facilities, and services. And we've been, like I say, we've been doing this for decades. And the co-op really is driven by one simple purpose, and that's doing good works, which really means that we're committed to having a positive impact in the lives that we touch, whether it's from the growers at source to the communities in which we work, and even here at home with our employees. So thanks again for the opportunity. I look forward to hearing a lot more from Raj and Greg and the other people on the panel.
All right. Well, thank you, Tony. My name is Raj. I'm the founder of Young Mountain Tea. And I thought I would tell or share my introduction with a brief story about why I started the company. And that really begins with this picture right here, which is a picture I took in 2013 in April. I was in the Northern Himalayas, or Himalayas, however you want to pronounce it, of India, and was there to document the lived experience of agricultural communities. And so Jamuna, the woman pictured here, let me take her picture and kind of follow her around for the day. And this is where we began. You can see her two kids who, after we took this picture, she sent off to school. And from there, I got to follow her in her day-to-day chores, the next of which was collecting firewood to use for cooking the family's meals. So I took this picture, and then about 20 minutes later, was kind of shocked to find myself taking a very different picture. And that's this one right here. And that's the same woman, that's Jamuna, 70 feet up in a pine tree, stripping the tree branch by branch so that she had enough fuel to cook food for her family. And she didn't do this because she wants to. She does it because she has no choice if she's going to keep her family fed. And I was 25 when I took this picture, and I was standing on a ridgeline kind of opposite to this tree. And I had this moment holding the camera in my hand, asking myself, what role of the dice put Jamuna in that tree with no option to just be a mother to her family, and me with the camera in my hand and a return ticket back to the US. And I'm of Indian descent, but born and brought up in the US. And so Young Mountain really started as my search to find an answer to that question. How do we create opportunity that's equitable for all and doesn't involve environmental degradation like we have here? And so I started Young Mountain with a promise to a group of farmers that were right outside Jamuna's village that if they would grow tea, I would set up a company in the US to sell it. And so what we're doing with Young Mountain is trying to solve a series of interrelated problems that are shown here between urban migration that's happening as farming villages get hollowed out and youth leave to go find work in the cities. That leaves behind once rich farmland that's deteriorating to dirt, and climate change making all these issues worse by exacerbating floods that trigger landslides. And we believe that tea has a lot of potential to help reverse these by creating jobs, serving as an anchor crop for biodiversity to revitalize wastelands, and then helping drink carbon out of the atmosphere. And so I'll look forward to more in a second, but just to wrap it, this is our mission at Young Mountain. We work with farmers to raise the quality of their tea so that they can earn more and raise the quality of their lives. And organic is very central to the way that work happens. So I'll look forward to sharing more in a second, but for now, I'll pass it over to Greg.
Thank you, Raj. Caloostians is almost a 70-year company that's been involved in industrial spices for years. We're around the world in many places, and it's funny specifically with people look at my title, well, you're a sales guy with business development, but actually in the spice world, business development is all about developing relationships, as Tony and Raj talked about, with people around the world. So that's what the role that we deal with. And as we've looked at people, and again, unlike here in the States where we've been farming and we have a very consistent, somewhat farming system that's controlled by sometimes larger shareholders. There's so many small shareholders in the global program, as Amber called out earlier, that we started looking at this and said, okay, what is sustainability? So, I call it sustainability squared. One of the things that we need to do is for people to understand that the sustainable practices that we put in place, starting with organic, are also needed to be drive through to be sustainable for the farmer. So the farmer has to be resilient, using those terms. So kind of what we've tried to focus on is developing the organic mindset, if you will, to start with, about how this is a key piece. And this is critical in some of the parts of the world that in some cases have been farming the same land for millennia. And so there's a lot of tradition and things of that nature. So one of the real focuses is how do we get to that level of the farm and convince farmers. They all want to do something different, but they need help in trying to understand it, because they're dealing with situations that sometimes we don't think about. They're dealing with currency changes. They're also dealing with changes in regulations from place to place. So one of the things we have to continue to do is to try to help giving them the background and to help for them from the converting and giving them the tools that they need. So again, one of the big way we start our programs are similar to what many others have done. We start with the GFSI Global Food Safety Initiative program, go from there to organic to sustainable for things like Rainforest Alliance, things of that nature. That's what we're pushing for, to try to continue to help the farmers get better and better and have a more robust supply chain. And the big one there is at number 4. We're trying to create a safety net for the grower, so that grower has an insurance policy. So again, ultimate goal: sustainable farming practices, sustainable income for the farmer. One of the things that we're the most proud of is some of the work that we've been trying to do. One of the big things we hear from around the world, whether it be Egypt, India, Turkey, Albania, is they do not have a good way of organic fertilization and that. So we've been working with universities in those areas to come up with an organic fertilizer. Basically, it's based on worm castings, same things we've used in many places, but we've been able to concentrate that and deliver it to the farmers so they can put in their existing systems. And as Amber called out before in the socioeconomical part of it, we see here that we saw a significant 30% yield in the oil, which the oil is the driving factor when it comes to value. We've seen more of a 15% yield in the product. So basically, we're trying to build a safety net for that farmer by working with what they're existing doing and not trying to change what they do, change their practices, but give them more tools in their toolbox to make it work. So again, our goal is to customize things for that, and it's very similar to what our 2 other partners on here with us are talking about, because each one of these locations has different cultures and different ways of going about it. So that's kind of an update, a little bit of an introduction of what Caloostians and how we see the organic fitting into our supply chain.
Great, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Tony and Raj. I want to, so I mentioned the report that we did, and we found so many different kinds of benefits that organic offers in this world. And I wanted to ask each of you, what is the most important difference that organic makes from your perspective? And okay, perfect. Sorry, I just got distracted by the slide. I didn't know if we were going to go to like a panel, like where the view of us, just our faces as we talk. But it's okay if we leave it on this slide. Perfect, thank you. Now I can see you. So let's go ahead, Tony, since it's been a few minutes since we've heard from you. We could start with you. What's the biggest difference for you?
Yeah, I think for us, and it really, is built in our purpose, is that we think that, we can bring a higher value, obviously, to the farmers, that organic brings to those farmers. That really, honestly, this, Raj alluded to this earlier, but the same problem with farmers that we have here in Iowa, the same problem we have around the world, and that making a living and keeping the children on the farms becomes more and more difficult. So organic allows that premium. Most of our herbs, spices, and teas are all coming from micro farmers in the developing world, and in many cases they're already doing things organically. We learned that a long time ago. So our helping transition to certified organic and helping them create a bit of creating a market and creating helping getting the things to market is really helping bring those economics to positive economics to their families. Beyond the economics part of it is really just that it's better for people in the environment. We know that. Lessening of those exposures to harmful chemicals from the land of the farmers and on their consumers. Roughly 80%, something like that, of our botanicals that we sell in our company are organic, and our mission is to nourish people and planet, always be fair. So we've been pioneering this kind of sourcing for more than 45 years, and that relationship that we can create with those organic farmers allows us to bring the best flavors to the bottles. But in the end, it really becomes a relationship where organics create a business engine that's extremely important for our farmers and certainly Frontier Co-op.
That's great. I'm not sure. Greg, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go. Again, I think we're going to have a consistent theme here, but one of the key is, I think it's a dual thing for us. One is the food safety of the product that we're providing, because whether that be the risk of a chemical, which is always a major part of anything we do. I think that is a critical piece for the consumer as well as for the farmer itself. And I think the other part is kind of the thing Tony just took up. How do we make sure the farmer is viable? How do we make sure, hey, whether that be in the United States or anywhere else, one of our passions is, and I think one of the challenges or challenge and opportunity that organic brings is for a small holder to be, with specialty crops, able to do something that they get hung up into traditional agriculture they could not do. So commodities would not give them that return. It gives them an avenue to see the ability to have more of a better return, if you will, on their investment, but also keep them on the farm, keep them in that position.
Yeah, and I'll just keep building on the points that Greg and Tony are making, that for me, the biggest difference, organic versus conventional, which is still a bizarre term that we refer to it as conventional, is that it realigns the way we think about the origins of our food with the way nature makes it already. And I think that getting back in tune with the fact that we are not separate from nature, but rather part of it, is going to be fundamental to developing when we think about long-term sustainable food systems. And specifically around that, so it's taking that long-term view and thinking about health of all of us as being connected to the health of our environments and the people that make our food. And I guess I wanted to call it one thing on that idea of safety that Amber already touched on, which is fairly unique to tea. which is that from when tea is harvested to when it reaches our cups to when we're drinking it ourselves, it is never washed or cleaned. The farmer plucks it off of a tea bush and it's processed, put into sacks that gets transported and brought to us. So if those tea plants have been sprayed with pesticides, there's a good chance that the water-soluble pesticides are literally getting consumed in the way one of my mentors taught me. Like, it's effectively, if you don't drink organic tea, you're running the risk of drinking a chemical cocktail. And I don't know about you, but that's certainly not what I think of when I think of drinking tea. So I think when we think organic, whether it's for the consumer, whether it's for the farmer and reduced exposure to toxic chemicals, or whether we think about for the soils itself that support us long-term and thinking about the health of the nutrients, the microorganisms underneath the ground, it's all connected to this idea that, we need to realign the way we function and grow our foods with the way that nature grows it already.
Yeah, thanks. I love that. I wanted to focus a bit on the socioeconomic side of things. All of you keep bringing up these points that fall into that bucket, and partly because in general, I think it's harder to find scientific studies that focus on these aspects. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you all here, is because you get to offer a bit more than what we can in our report. And there was, I wanted to read one quote from the report and then just sort of build off of that from your responses, but it's in the same section on socioeconomics, and it talks more about equity. So the quote is, with deep colonial roots, oppressive systems still exist in many historical spice and tea production regions. Business models from the colonial British era are still present in Indian tea estates. Private entities often own the land and facilities where tea farmers and workers live and oversee their choices for housing, food, healthcare, and subsidies for children's education. And I know that every one of you on this call, like this, it touches you, and I'm sure you have a response to that you would love to share. I also know, Tony, that this is something that you all have been focusing on too. So I wanted to open it up with you and ask you, what can businesses do to help uplift the smallholder farmers? Adding to all that we've been saying up to this point.
Yeah, business can do a lot, especially people like Frontier Co-op, where we interface right with the farms. We're driven by that purpose I mentioned earlier in our cooperative, doing good works. So it really is founded with the idea that we can do business and do it in the right way, and it makes your company more successful. And that idea, the right thing for the people on the planet, is really what makes us tick. And so how can, the majority of our supply chain I mentioned are very small micro farmers on a couple hectares of land, and helping them build their business through capacity and capability projects is and helping their communities are just a better quality of life that we can help make. I do believe that, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I do believe that business can and should be a major catalyst for change. Frontier Co-op, it's about how we do the things that really helps the farmers increase their standard of living. It's not just what we do. I touch on a couple projects. One of them, we're actually partnering with Young Mountain Tea and USAID, but it's a current project we have in northern India in the Kumaon region, and it's just a great example of how business can uplift small farm holders. This region's in northern India near Nepal. It's been greatly impacted by climate change. The farmers, there's roughly 500 of them, which 90% are women. They took over this sort of wasteland, and they're trying to reinvigorate the soil and to grow organic tea. These hot, dry summers and monsoon rains have wreaked havoc over the years, and the hillsides. If you've ever been in the developing world, I think Raj mentioned, deforestation, and they're cutting down these trees. They've got it's just the nature of necessity and survival in some respects. So they're trying to reclaim this land, do it through organic tea, and those plantings enrich the soil and they create a natural anchor for the hillsides. But beyond growing tea, we're also partnering again with USAID and Young Mountain Tea to bring a processing facility to that region that will be operated and partly owned by the small farmers. And this is the kind of things like Frontier's done over decades. And it's just one example of those long-term partnerships. Another good example would be work we've done with our partners in Guatemala and Fedecavera. It's a large co-op made up of 42 smaller co-ops or regional co-ops in the mountainous areas around Caban. The cooperative supports over 100,000 people, mostly indigenous Mayan farmers and their families. And it's been our sourcing partner since 2009. And they grow organic allspice, organic turmeric, organic cardamom for us. And we have a long history and a relationship of community business building there, where we started with some very modest financial support in the early days. I mean, screens and magnets and things for processing that were pretty, rudimentary kinds of things, but it's grown into a number of projects. We opened a dental clinic there. We most recently helped with the mobile dental clinic, and they also have a doctor that works out the back of that of the truck. We're really working on a big project. It's again with USAID and our partners there in Guatemala on transforming their manufacturing food safety processes and equipment. So in return, like what we've got out of it, not only have a great sustainable supply partner, but it's one of our biggest accomplishments. We actually brought into production and scaled high quality organic turmeric. As India continues to use more and more of their own products, organic turmeric is hard to find. We were able to make it commercially available for the first time out of Guatemala and organic. It's that kind of partnership that has led to where we're at today. And over the years, I think we've invested roughly $300,000 into these projects, but I can assure you that every penny we put in has come back and benefited us. So I happened to get the chance about mid-September. It's been a long time since we've been able to travel and get into country as much as I'd like, but I just got back from Guatemala in mid-September, and I couldn't have been more impressed with how much Fedecavera does in the way of sustainability and social responsibility and overall service to the members. So I could go on and on, but those are the kind of projects that I think really, really do make a difference in the lives of our farming communities. And I always tell people that in the sourcing world, if you're not willing to invest in the supply chain, I'm not sure how you think that's going to be there, given all the dynamics of farming and all the trials and tribulations, if we're not willing to invest back into them for the long term. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And Raj, I'd like to invite you to add some thoughts to that, since you all are working in partnership.
Yeah, sure. And I thought I could take the chance to go a little deeper into that project that Tony outlined, and the partnership that we have with Frontier and with USAID to make this happen is truly one of the most exciting things that I can imagine in my life. So I'll click over to give you a little bit more on that. Oh, I think actually, maybe I'll pass through to this one. So to build on what Tony was sharing, and actually, Amber, that paragraph you read is both frightening and strikingly accurate for Indian tea. As a quick primer, India did not commercially grow tea until the 1830s, when the British stole it from China, brought it to India, forced local communities to give up their lands to grow tea, and then built a model that very quickly outpaced China as the world's #1 tea producer in just 4 decades, by bringing over a lot of techniques from the Industrial Revolution for the first time into tea. And so that model was really good at creating a lot of tea very quickly and very consistently, but it was not good at really thinking about the environment or the people necessary to support it. So the industry today has modernized a bit, but unfortunately, farmers, basically kind of repeating what Amber shared, the farmers that work on tea estates, which is the overwhelming majority of how Indian tea is made, they don't own the land, they don't own the tea bushes, they don't own the harvest, they often don't own their houses, they're dependent on the estate owners for food subsidies, for healthcare, and for education. So there's not a ton of incentive for many of them to stay in, so a lot of them are leaving. This project is an experiment with developing an alternative to that model, an alternative to the estate model that centers the smallholder farmer, and looks at beginning to experiment with shifting ownership, not only of the land, but of the processing facility where the value of tea really comes through into the hands of the people that make it. And one of the reasons it's kind of exciting with tea to do it is that all tea comes from the same plant. So black tea, green tea, white tea, matcha, oolong, pu'er, it's all the same leaf grown in different grown in different soils and then processed in these kinds of facilities into different styles. And it is that single plant's leaves that are responsible for being the world's most consumed beverage after water. And I was wondering, is that just like a tea statistic that tea enthusiasts like to share? But no, it's actually a UN reported statistic as well. And yet, so while India is one of the top 5 world's producers of tea, there's almost no examples where the farmers own the actual processing facility. So this is an experiment, again, in saying what happens when the farmers don't just own their harvest, but own the finished good. That puts them in a fundamentally different place in tea's value chain and gives them the ability to not only see more of the benefits from their own work, but also to understand further downstream and down the supply chain what happens to their goods. So this is the project we're most excited about. I'll say that it's exciting that not only will this help to shift the sort of financial futures of the farmers involved, it'll also help to position this region to demonstrate the viability of specialty tea. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked, but in addition to actually, because India is the world's largest producer of tea, and it's all pretty much cheap black tea that's destined for tea bags, this will be the first example of a specialty tea factory that's also designed to US food safety standards. So hopefully they're able to appeal to a much larger potential customer base. And so, yeah, I'll wrap myself up there with that project and just pass it on to Greg.
Thank you. Amber, is the audio better now?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. And like tea, one of the things that we see often, and Tony saw it a lot, sees a lot in Guatemala, is there's a history when people have these small holders. One of the big challenges that we saw and we see consistently, especially when we're converting people from conventional products to organic, is that the supply chain of conventional products is a small farmer sells to a collector who sells to a bigger collector who sells to a bigger collector. And unfortunately, it is all, we see that. And unfortunately, what that has done is, sorry, get my hands out in front of the camera, but what that has done is it puts too many people in the process. Whether the colonial is still there, or in some cases like Albania, where it was communist rule for years, you still have some of the same traditions in that. So what we've had to do to break through, and we believe organic is the way to do it, is to be able to have the relationships directly with farmers or smaller groups of farmers to allow them to have input into it. So that is one of the big things that we've done, is we've taken those multiple layers of collectors out of the middle of it to be able, so the farmers are getting the bigger share of what their product is growing. And we believe that is a critical piece of dealing with of how do we make them viable as opposed to just throwing it into a bigger pool. I'll cut it off right there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all that insight. And I am going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, because in response to this discussion or your presentations, there has a couple people actually have posed some questions to you. And I think that this is a fitting time to sort of slot it into our discussion here. We've had 2 Black female tea farmers from the US who have asked basically the same question. As we talk about equity and inclusion, where do small farmers from the US fit into this equation as you're talking about supporting them throughout the supply chain or with your supply chain? How does this work in the US? I don't know, Tony, if you want to start us off.
I can step in. Well, in terms of our products, very, very, very few of our products, and we handle hundreds and hundreds of them between herbs, spices, oils, extracts, can be grown in the United States. So it's a little bit of a different challenge for us. But I would say, it's an important aspect. Equitable land access is a big issue. here in the United States, as it is everywhere in the world. And that, from our standpoint, we've actually partnered here locally with a nonprofit that really is, trying to do just exactly that for some of our, newest immigrants here in the local area. And so these minorities, these marginalized farmers have a chance to get the, we help with the land, the equipment, ag education. Really, there's a whole finance and sort of business support that's trying to be done, help them with, so they can not only grow some of the more traditional and crops that they would have grown and eaten themselves at home, but also to take that to market and stuff. So it's an important issue. One we're trying to, we certainly work on this around the world, and to the best, to our abilities right now, we're trying to do that locally, and just as a general support as in community support.
I'd love to chime in as well and just say, first of all, I think it's super exciting to learn about more tea farmers here in the US. It's very early days for the American tea industry, but I think there's tremendous potential if it can be done effectively and well. And thankfully, the teas that I've tried from the US, the quality is coming up very quickly. I think the point on equity is an important one to acknowledge that, a lot of these conversations, because 99.9% of tea comes from outside the US, it doesn't always acknowledge what's happening domestically. I'll just offer a couple of resources that might be useful for our friends who are growing tea in the US. If you're not familiar, there's a League of US Tea Growers that's actually led by a woman that's in Eugene, Oregon, which is the hometown for Young Mountain Tea. And they are working to collectivize to basically elevate the issues that I think the panel participants were raising. So it might be worth checking out, linking in if you're not familiar. And then also UC Davis is the first American university to put serious resources behind the study of tea with the Global Tea Initiative. And they're also trying to figure out these kinds of issues. So I don't think that there's necessarily an answer that I can offer, but I do know that these questions are getting looked at by other organizations domestically, and hopefully that they can help, because I think it'll be, I think the questions around American growers of tea, particularly Black women, I think that they are beginning to get dug into, and I think it'll be through strength of numbers that they get elevated to the point of leading to change. So, and I wish you the best, and I'd love to try your teas.
Thanks, Raj. And Greg, I know that the questions were specifically about tea, but a lot of herbs and spices are also grown domestically. And I know that you and I have talked about this too. So if you wanted to chime in.
And generally in our world, we think of spices and herbs as dehydrated products, whereas the fresh products are used differently, as we talked. And, the U.S. grows a great deal of herbs that are used in the fresh market. But one of the things that, and Amber, the thing I'm the most excited about the Organic Center from a technical standpoint is we had a project a couple of years ago where we were working with Oklahoma State to try to grow cumin in the United States down in the Southwest to give farmers in that area an alternative crop. And to me, this is one of the things that I would love to see. Luckily, I was president of ASTA at the time, so I had a little bit of a bully pulpit to kind of push that forward. But I do believe there's a real opportunity for us to utilize some spices, whether it be mustard or coriander or cumin, that can be grown here in the States. And I think you would give an opening to a lot of small shareholders or small stakeholders, farmers, to be able to do that. But I do believe we need university type help to try to do that, to change some of the mindset. So where they're growing more and more wheat, okay, grow cumin where there's wheat there, or grow sesame or mustard or coriander. So to me, the question was about tea, but I think it's also relevant, the fact that there is a market for certain things we could grow here.
Right. And there's a potential role of increasing that market for those alternative crops too, that you're saying. Great. Thank you. Thanks for accommodating that little twist. Before I move on to other issues, I want to stay on the socioeconomic side of things for a little bit longer, and invite Raj first to share some stories from the field that can highlight some of the benefits to farmers and their communities from growing organically. The report focuses a lot on, reducing pesticide exposure. Greg, you mentioned yield, which I thought was really interesting earlier, that organic practices was increasing yield. What are some of the things that you've seen in the field yourself, Raj?
Sure, yeah. I want to tell the story of a farmer group in eastern Nepal called Tinjure. Tin means three, Jure means hills. So this co-op named themselves after the three hills that these three villages are located on. And in the early 2000s, they started to grow tea and then saved up their money. And then in 2013, set up their own processing facility that they own. And that's why we wanted to work with them, because they're Nepal's first community-owned processing facility. And they'd always been growing tea organically, and they're very proud of it. And they kind of go beyond just organic. They're very big on vermicompost. And so their tea bushes are among the healthiest that I've ever seen in my life. And we tested them regularly, and they test squeaky clean all the time. But they weren't certified organic. And I guess this is more sort of highlighting the role of certifications here. But in 2019, they got their organic certification, which enabled us to then pitch their teas to a handful of customers for whom that's a sort of hard requirement. And from that, our purchasing of their teas was able to quadruple, and we're able to offer them 10% more than what they were earning before for the same tea. So their costs didn't go up besides the administrative cost to manage the certification, but their income did. And beyond just the sort of earnings from the sale of the tea, the stability of knowing that they have somebody to buy their teas because they're certified organic has been able put them in a position to plan into the future. And I think that's one of the central challenges that we're kind of circling in the socioeconomic conversation, is that a big challenge for farmers is just knowing that if they grow something, that someone will buy it. And so when we have these kinds of assurances and we can commit to higher volumes, it puts us in a much better position, the kind of position we want to be able to make longer term commitments to our partners.
Yeah, that's great. I'd invite Greg and Tony to add to that if you'd like. And I'll put this in the parking lot if we do that, because I want to return to that concept of certification and benefits and nuances of that. But first, I don't know if Greg and Tony want to add anything from the field. And it's okay to pass.
I'll add a quick comment. I think one of the key things is we try to move people from organic, or to organic, from conventional, is that 3 to 4 year transition period. So I mean, for us, one of the critical pieces is we do have markets for both sides of it. So what we try to do is try to pull those pieces together. So as Raj said, they know they've got a long-term commitment here, because they're making a commitment to do those things, and they need to know that they've got somebody who's going to be there. Because unfortunately, a lot of them have dealt with markets come and then they go. The market moves and I'm not selling it anymore. Okay, if I'm selling cumin seeds in India and the market crashes, okay, what do I do? So I think the assurances, and I go back to my original comment about safety net, is there's multiple ways to build a safety net. There's many cords in that safety net. So I think the organics give them another tool to put another cord in that safety net.
Yeah, that's great. And I love how all of you are bringing out some of these complexities that are specific to organic and for certification reasons. So a lot of the benefits that we talk about in our report, and in general, when we talk about the benefits of organic, are related to organic practices. But there's also that added layer of certification. And we know that there are challenges to certification that are realized more by different groups of people and different farmers. And there are also opportunities to that. And while we see in published literature that there are socioeconomic benefits to organic certification, and that those benefits can increase with additional certification layers, particularly for those internationally like fair trade. We've had some conversations internally in this group that have talked about the complexities of that, but I'm wondering, I'm going to put you on the spotlight first this time, Greg. What is the value of certification, of organic certification, to your suppliers?
The value of the organic certification is, it's almost like what we talk about all the time with the organic brand. I mean, the organic brand means something. The organic brand means something to global customers. So with it meaning something to customers, it means something to the suppliers when they can create that. But I believe as we continue to evolve organic and have more socioeconomic, more including things like that are consistent with fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, Muddy Boots, whatever programs, other programs that are there, whether it be parts of the Sustainable Spice Initiative, which is kind of more Eurocentric, things of that nature. What we see is that the farmers, once they're starting to understand that, they add more to it. It's kind of a building block. We lay the foundation with food safety. On top of that foundation, we go to organic, and then we continue to move up the area. And it does two things, I believe, happen more than anything, and that is it gives them the assurances of what they can do as they add more to it. But it also lets them move further up the value chain. And the further a farmer can move up the value chain, the better they're going to be. So, you know, if they have those certifications in place, then they have been a local buyer or a U.S. buyer, whether it be a CPG company or whoever, has much more confidence in the fact that they can buy that stuff directly and they don't have to go through 3 different middlemen. So again, I think it's critical to have them. I think they build on each other, and I believe it's kind of a means to an end. I'm not sure that answers the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my standpoint, it levels the playing field. And, you know, now everybody's playing by the same rules. All the things that Greg said brings people to this certain level. But, you know, in our business, because, you know, we've got brands and we have competitors, and, you know, at least with organic, you know, if you're making the claim, I'm sure there's people who don't do it right, but for the most part, if you're making that claim, you're doing it right. We're all dealing with the same set of ground rules, and that's not true for other things, right? There's a lot of good things going on in this world. Some do them really well, regenerative, and some use the words loosely, and there's just not that oversight and regulatory framework that keeps everybody, you know, on the same playing field. So I think, you know, beyond all the other things where it raises people up, gets a higher premium, it's just important, I think, if you're going to market, to have something you can be sure you're marketing, you know, in a solid way. So.
Yeah, I'll chime in that I think it is marketability for the farmers that the certification changes. For the farmers that we work with, at least, it's not really an exciting thing for them to hold. I mean, they view it as a necessity, but not something that they're excited to get in place and to maintain. So I think there's a great benefit to the consumer in demonstrating sort of authenticity of a statement all the way back. But I think it's worth acknowledging that a lot of farmers, it's a challenge, and it's an administrative burden. It's costs for them. And, you know, there's different standards like NOP versus NPOP. So I think I'm actually kind of excited about maybe some point in the future when we can leverage some types of blockchain technologies to demonstrate that same level of traceability, but maybe outside of a certification or third party sort of validation of the accuracy of what the practices are. I think that's a long time coming. But I do think the farmers, for most, if it weren't for an increased premium or some sort of buying opportunity or selling opportunity that they wouldn't have access to, a lot of them likely wouldn't pursue it. That's my view.
Great, thank you. And thinking long-term into the future, we've been focusing so much on the socioeconomic side of things. And Raj, I loved how in your introduction you mentioned this, this awareness of the environmental sustainability of organic farming. And so I wanted to talk about climate change, because everybody's talking about climate change, and just see from your all's perspective, whether it's from your business or your supply chain, you know, what are some of the challenges that you are facing or that you see that are coming, and you could leave it as challenges if you want, but if you also have like suggestions for solutions, that'd be great. And let's see, maybe I'll start with Greg.
You know, this is a passion of ours because soil health is, again, we believe that that's a dual benefit. One is the farmer gets the benefit, but the other is there's nothing in our research and our around the world, we don't believe anything is as valuable as soil health when it comes to pushing controlling controlling climate change, carbon sequestration, water usage. All of those pieces are such a critical piece when your soil is healthy. And again, that's the reason we've invested where we have, and we strongly believe that. And and again, this is one of those things that we always say that food safety is not a competitive advantage. I don't believe anything in climate change should be competitive advantage. I think it should be shared across the industries. And whether that be full-blown regenerative agriculture, whether it be all the different pieces, there's multiple tools in that toolbox. But from our perspective, whether you're farming in Egypt or India or Turkey or Albania or Guatemala, especially on places that have been farmed for thousands of years, soil health is a critical piece. And I think that is a major part of what needs to happen when it comes to managing the climate change situation.
Yeah, thanks. I'm seeing lots of nods from Tony. Prompting some thoughts for you.
Well, there are challenges related to climate change for our business. I'm sure everybody on this call can say that. I mean, we're finding, more crop failures, reduced production. We've been forced to, in a lot of ways, spread our bet across different continents in some product lines because it's, staying very singularly focused on an area. One would be we did a lot of pepper in southern India, and there was a tremendous floods there, and now you've got literally all your pepper in one basket. So I think we see it. We believe in a couple of things, right? I mean, we certainly have to continue to try to move and balance our business, but we think that there's that the idea of crop diversification, especially with these micro farmers, is a huge piece for them personally. I think when you look at Madagascar, you find a lot of those people are just totally dependent on vanilla. When we started with Feta Cavera in Guatemala, a lot of it was coffee. So we want people to have multiple cash crops, okay, and sort of spread that bet across multiple products that maybe would handle that change and that climate change in a particular year, and then honestly grow their own food. Not enough of our farmers are necessarily growing their own food, so they're not balancing. They're all in on vanilla and not into even creating the products that they can eat themselves. So there's a way. Those are some of the ways that we're trying to. We have some work going on in that area, some development work going on in some countries around the world where we're trying to get the farmers to think like that. While I do believe that organic crops and have shown a greater resiliency, I still think that to do this and do it in a way that they're going to overcome climate change challenges, that they need to diversify.
Yeah. Raj.
As it relates to the Indian tea industry, the most dramatic impact that our farmers tell us about climate change is the increasingly unpredictable timing of the monsoon season, and tea being a crop that grows best with periods of heavy rainfall and sunlight. That unpredictability and variability is, as Tony was saying, is resulting in lower yield. But then also not only for the tea bushes themselves getting harmed, but the communities as a whole suffering from increased levels of landslides. What's happening is that the summers are hotter and drier, so the soils are getting kind of dried out. And then when the rains come, they're coming harder. And so it's washing all these, lands down mountainsides and taking out roads. And I was there last month, and for the second year in a row, October is typically the best time to visit the mountains because it's post-monsoon, but both this year and last year, the roads got washed out, so they were inaccessible. I mean, for us, it was an inconvenience for a business trip. For a lot of communities that rely on a lot of goods coming in and out of the region to support their well-being, it was a very different scenario. So that's the biggest single challenge right now. Some of the things that in tea farmers are trying to experiment with. The long term is drought-resistant cultivars. So specific varieties of the tea plant that can better withstand that kind of variability, but that's a long-term play. And then in the short run, some farmers are trying to experiment with something that would have been unheard of, which is to do micro drip irrigation of tea gardens, which traditionally is totally rain-fed. But recognizing that that consistency really is vital to the health of the plant, that's something that they're experimenting with. And then the last thing I'll offer is a potential ray of hope or positivity, at least in my mind, for tea, is that the tea bush is a tree that lives over 100 years old. And so one of the things we're really excited about seeing, but what is the carbon sequestration potential for these tea bushes? So not only are the farmers, because she's a perennial as well, planting one plant and then able to harvest it for generations, but also in the same process, that there's some carbon offset programs that we could help establish. And actually, I just wanted to show this little show and tell. I just got this book recently. It's called Carbon Neutral Tea Production in China. So these kinds of issues are getting researched and figured out. And I think there will be solutions that emerge, but right now it's very much an active challenge that we're all working through together.
Yeah, thanks for landing on that positive note. I'm looking at time, and I could just, talk with you all day about this, and we are at time. And I want to ask you one final question, which is again sort of looking to the future and a little bit maybe more positive light. I want to know from each of you if there are any products or ingredients or agriculture trends that you're excited about in the organic space, or even just for spices, teas, and herbs more broadly. I'll start with you, Tony, then Raj, and we'll land on Greg, and then I'll do some final wrap up.
Sure. It's certainly not a new trend, but I think it continues to be a growing trend that consumers care more and more about how their products come to market. And, organic plays a piece of that, right? They have a concern for the environment, a concern for the health of the farmers, a concern for economic viability. Organic answers is some answer to these things. They're important parts of good business for those people. So I think, in all fairness, it's that story of where and how we bring products to consumers it resonates. And in all fairness, full transparency, is how we try to market and differentiate. We want to be better at it. We want to go deeper. We want to be more substantive in our work. And I think that's the difference for us, but it's built on that trend where people do care about how their products come to market.
I'm going to selfishly talk about a project that I'm excited about that we just unveiled last month, which was the launch of our biodegradable organic tea bags, which was really driven by the factory project that we're working with Frontier and USAID to launch. That processing facility is going to produce literally hundreds of thousands of pounds of tea. And so we need to be able to have it reach more and more people. And so the launch of these tea bags was a way to begin positioning ourselves to be able to reach more people. And I'll just remind everybody that next Friday is Black Friday, and tea is a great gift. Thanks for the chance to plug ourselves, Amber.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder of how fast this year has gone, Greg.
I'm the most excited from a trend perspective. It seems like that the consumer and the world is rediscovering the value of herbs and spices and the healthy diet. Whether that be sage, whether it be rosemary, whether it be turmeric. And to me, that's the exciting part, instead of just as a culinary part of it, but of how it fits together with and having an organic supply chain behind it gives the consumer that much more. So to me, that's the exciting part of being of the rest of the world seeing what some parts of India see in some places, or what Turkey does with sage. To me, that's the exciting part of what we will see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's great. I want to say thank you so much again to the three of you. It has been an honor to share this space with you and to learn so much from you. I also want to say that there was an oversight in my slide when I listed all those brands. And for some reason, Frontier was not on there, which is crazy to me. I apologize for that. Frontier definitely gave us so much input, and especially on the scientific front. So I do really value. I apologize for missing you on that, and it won't happen again. I'm going to hand it over to Libby now to do some final housekeeping.
Thanks so much, Amber. And I will start by reiterating thanks to all three of our panelists today, and to you, Amber, as well as to Tom for being here. I think this has just been a fantastic and dynamic webinar, and I will do a quick plug as I just put into the chat. You can learn so much more from the Organic Center on our website. If you go to the link in the chat right now, you'll see a full arsenal of on-demand webinars, and by tomorrow you're going to see this webinar. You can dig back into it again and continue to learn from just our really excellent panelists and from Amber and other science educators from the Organic Center over the years. And finally, I just want to say again, thank you so much to Greg, to Tony, to Raj for spending so much time in preparation, for building beautiful slides, for driving a conversation that I think was so important for today. We really appreciate the time, commitment that your organizations put into being here with us today, and for support on the report as well. And Amber, thanks so much for driving such a fantastic conversation today. With that, I am going to end things and thank everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to having you at future organic educational opportunities at the Trade Association and the Organic Center in 2023. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for the chance, and thanks to the Organic Center for organizing.
Thanks so much, everyone.